Emiliano Zapata. The name alone, it's just so powerful, right? Even if you only know a little bit about the Mexican Revolution, you've definitely heard of him. He's this larger-than-life figure, a symbol of rebellion, of fighting for the land. But what about the man? Who was he really, behind that famous mustache and that incredible motto? Well, that's exactly what we're going to get into. Zapata lives. The struggle continues. I mean, think about that for a second. Over 100 years after he died, people are still chanting his name. It's a rallying cry for activists, not just in Mexico, but all over the world. That's a powerful legacy. So the big question is, how? How did this leader from a small state in Mexico become this huge international symbol for social justice? Let's break it down. All right, first things first. To really get Zapata, we've got to peel back the layers of the myth and find the actual man. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. The popular image of Zapata, the myth, it's that he was this poor, uncultured peasant, maybe a simple bandit, just driven by pure desperation. But the reality is way more complex. He wasn't impoverished at all. His family was actually pretty well off. And he wasn't some random guerrilla fighter. He was a highly respected community leader and a skilled horse trainer. He was so good, in fact, that he even worked for the dictator's own son-in-law. So he didn't fight because he had nothing to lose. He chose to fight. It was a choice born from conviction, not desperation. And here's the proof of just how respected he was. At only 30 years old, the people in his own village, Anaquilco, elected him. They chose him to be the president of their defense council. Think about that. This wasn't some guy seizing power. No, this was the community putting their complete trust in him. They trusted him with everything to defend their ancestral lands, their way of life, and, well, that became the fight of his life. And that fight, that defense of the land, well, it throws him right into the heart of the conflict that would define not just him, but the entire revolution. So to really get what they were up against, you have to understand who the haciendados were. These were basically the super wealthy, powerful owners of these massive agricultural estates called haciendas. And under the dictator at the time, Porfirio Diaz, their power was just spiraling out of control. In Zapata's home state, Morelos, the situation was just awful, a total catastrophe. The haciendados were expanding their huge sugar plantations, and to do it, they were just taking everything. They were seizing communal lands that villages had owned for centuries, they were taking control of all the water, and they were forcing the peasants into what was basically a form of debt slavery, working on the very land that used to be theirs. This is the injustice that Zapata was chosen to fight. And out of all that injustice came this incredibly simple but powerful rallying cry, tierra y libertad, land and liberty. I mean, it just perfectly sums it all up, doesn't it? Those were the two things that had been stolen from the people: their land, their way of making a living, and their freedom. This wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was the entire mission statement. So at first, Zapata actually joined up with the main revolutionary leader, Francisco Madero, who was promising big reforms. But when Madero actually became president, those promises kind of fizzled out, especially the one about land. So Zapata felt betrayed, and he broke with Madero. And he made that break official with a document that, honestly, is his political masterpiece. And that document was the Plan of Ayala. Now, you gotta understand, this thing wasn't just a list of complaints. Oh, no. It was a full-blown blueprint for a totally new society. It called President Madero a traitor to the cause, straight up. And, crucially, it laid out a very clear, very radical vision for how land reform needed to happen, and it was non-negotiable. I mean, just look at how specific and how radical this was. Number one, all stolen lands had to be returned to the villages immediately, no waiting. Number two, a full third of the big haciendas would be taken by the government and handed out to the people. And get this, if any of those big landowners fought back, well then the government would just take the rest of their land too. This was not about finding a middle ground. This was about completely flipping the whole system on its head. So it's one thing to have a radical plan on paper, right? But what happens when you actually get the chance to put it into action? Well, that brings us to one of the most amazing and honestly underappreciated parts of the whole revolution. Because for a short window of time, let's say from about 1914 to 1917, Zapata's army, the Zapatistas, were actually in control of their home state of Morelos. And this was their chance. This was their moment to take the Plan of Ayala from just words on a page and turn it into a real functioning society. Historians often call this period the Morelos Commune, And it was this incredible social experiment. The big landowners were gone, so the people of Morelos, with Zapata as their leader, started building their own kind of society, a society based on equality, governed by local village councils, and protected by their own army. And what they pulled off was pretty amazing. They actually redistributed the land, just like the plan said. They took over the whole sugar industry and handed it to workers' co-ops. They set up credit unions for farmers, built factories to make their own tools, and even started new schools. The whole thing was run from the bottom up, by the people, for the people. And nothing captures the spirit of this better than this famous quote from Zapata himself. There's this legendary story where his army took Mexico City, and they wanted him to sit in the presidential chair. He refused. He said something like sitting in that chair would just create ambition and ruin everything. It just shows you, his goal was never about power for himself. It was about power for his people. But as you can probably guess, this revolutionary dream couldn't last forever. The rest of Mexico was still engulfed in a brutal civil war. And Zapata's unwillingness to compromise, his absolute dedication to his principles, made him a huge target for the guys who were trying to grab power for themselves. And in the end, they didn't get him in a fair fight. It was a betrayal. A government colonel pretended he wanted to switch sides and join the Zapatistas. He set up a fake meeting to trick Zapata, luring him into an ambush at a hacienda. When Zapata rode in, the colonel's men just opened fire. He was only 39. But here's the thing. If his enemies thought killing the man would kill the idea, they were so wrong. His influence, if anything, got even stronger. Look at this timeline. Even before he died, his fight had already forced radical land reform into Mexico's brand new constitution in 1917. After he was gone, his own generals helped take down the government that killed him and finally put his reforms in place in Morelos. And then, fast forward all the way to 1994, a new rebellion pops up in southern Mexico. And what do they call themselves? The Zapatistas. The fight goes on. And this right here, this is maybe his most tangible legacy. Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution. It's the part that legally enshrined land reform, the idea that the land belongs to the people. It was written pretty much in direct response to Zapata and his movement. His fight literally became the law of the land. And that brings us full circle, doesn't it? Back to that chant, Zapata lives. They killed the man back in 1919, sure, but they couldn't kill the idea. And his story really makes you think, you know? We live in a world that's still fighting over land rights, inequality, and the rights of indigenous people. So it's worth asking, what does that cry for land and liberty really mean today? Because one thing seems certain, the struggle continues.